here we go. This is the first in a series looking at the Bible. I'm going to give 3 introductory videos and then I'm going to break down the Bible and spend 5 minutes on each of the 66 books of the Bible. So 3 introductory videos and then 66 videos, one for each of the books of the Bible, each one of them less than 5 minutes. I think that will take us through till something like the 24th of July. Okay, here we go. The Bible. What I want you to know in this first introductory video is that it's a book of books. Some people approach the Bible as if it's like a how-to guide, developing the leader within you, that kind of thing. If you want to get better at something, read the Bible and it will help you. Other people approach it as a bit like a recipe book. You kind of take a bit of this and a bit of that, mix it all together, and something will happen. Or it may go horrendously wrong, as it does in my case. The Bible is full of all kinds of different books. There's 66 of them, but there are all kinds of different kinds of literature in there as well. And the thing I want to say today is that in order to understand the Bible, in order to make sense of it, is you've got to remember that the different kinds of literature work in different kinds of ways. When I last moved, the removal man said, you know, you clergy, you're an absolute pain. You just got too many books. And I said to him, yeah, but you need different books for different kinds of things, don't you? He didn't realise that we'd only gone into the study at that point. There were more books in the living room and a whole pile more books upstairs. But the Bible's a bit like that. Different kinds of books to be read in different kinds of ways for different reasons. Some of them are like this, a hymn book. I haven't used one of these for a few weeks. And some of the bits of the Bible are hymns. They're praise songs used by a community in order to worship God. Some of it's like poetry. I love poetry. I'm getting to that age where finally it begins to make sense. This is a book by R.S. Thomas, a Welsh priest who wrote loads of poetry. At the end of his poem, Don't Ask Me, he says, poetry is that which arrives at the intellect by way of the heart. Kind of stuff that comes into here but works through your heart. It's a great name for a book, actually, The Way of the Heart. Some of what's in the Bible is a bit prophetic. It kind of looks around and says, I'm not sure the way we're living is right. There are all kinds of reflections at the moment as we deal with the fallout of this pandemic. This one, Rachel Carson's Silent Spring, written in the 60s about the environmental damage. Something that saw well ahead of its time what was on the horizon if we didn't change our way of living. Some of the Bible, it works like that. It looks around, names reality, and points us forward to the future and invites us to change. I don't know if you've come across this book. It's a beautiful book. The Boy, the Mole, the Fox and the Horse. You could take any one of these pages in here, beautiful images, and reflect on the words. Proverbs, some of the scriptures works in that kind of a way. It's a collection of sayings in order to inspire us, in order to challenge us, in order for us to think in other ways. I wouldn't recommend this one too much unless you're a clergy person or a church warden. The Church Representation Rules 2020. But actually we need guidance and law, as this is, in order to be able to live together. And some of what's in scripture works in that kind of a way. This is one of my favourite theology books written by a pal, Bound to Sin by Alistair McFadden. It kind of works out how in a world where there's great evil, do we make sense of God and of one another? And some of the stuff in scripture takes on those serious questions and invites us to think through some kind of a response. Doesn't answer all of the questions, but does ask the questions and explores the issues. Some of the Bible works like that, an exploration of who we are and how we live in relationship with one another. I love this book. I love anything by Robert Macfarlane. Just read everything he's ever written. This is all around how words are used to describe landscapes and how many of those words are falling out of use. It led to another brilliant book, Illustrations and Poems, The Lost Words. It's just a fantastic way of thinking through what do words mean. And some of the scriptures work in that kind of way, using unfamiliar language in order to describe reality, so that as we look around at the world, we reflect on what's important and think about what we don't want to lose. What do we want to hold on to in a fast changing world? How do we make sense of the world when the familiar is disappearing? Some of the scriptures works in that kind of way. H is for Hawk. Have you read this book? There's a new book coming out by this author, Helen MacDonald, later in the year. She's brilliant. And what she does is explores her own response to grief through her relationship with a goshawk. And it's not just interesting because it's about one person and her relationship with a bird. It's because it keys into stuff that we all feel and think at different times. And some of the scriptures does that sometimes. It takes individual stories to explore universal themes. This book, Thomas Cranmer by Dermot McCulloch, it changed my life. It's not just a history book, but it kind of explores one person's priorities, even to the point of death. And some of the scriptures works in that kind of a way as well, giving us examples of how people live, not so that we imitate them because we live in a different kind of society in different places, but so that we can distill from their examples things that are important. What does it teach us about what it means to live in our own contexts? I've really enjoyed this one recently, Tom Holland's Dominion, looking at the making of the Western world. In a few hundred pages, it traces centuries of developments all across Europe and helps us to think about where have we come from and where might we be going. How does stuff around us in the present, how can we explain it or at least try and understand it from the origins of what's gone on before? We need kind of books that help us to understand where we've come from as we think about where we might be going. And a lot of the scripture does that as well. The history stuff helps us to understand the past so that we can locate ourselves in the present. The Bible, then, isn't just one book, even though it's between two covers. It's a book of books, literature that works in all kinds of different ways. We can't read all of it as if it's one kind of literature. It works in different kinds of ways. I've tried to give some examples of the different kinds of literature that there are here. And as we go through the 66 books, we'll see that there are different kinds of writing for different times, for different purposes, and we have to read it in different kinds of ways. The Bible, a book? Well, it is, but it's a book of books as well.